Making room and making plans. Moving up, letting go, and kicking back. There are things in life that matter, and at NBT Bank, we're always here to help make those things possible. Because making it easier for you to live your life and focus on what matters to you is what we focus on every day.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 21st Century Business Forum. I'm your host, Clay Young. This morning, we are excited to have with us the man known as the best professional sales trainer in America, Jack Daly. The global management and sales expert is the award-winning author of Hyper Sales Growth and the Sales Playbook for Hyper Sales Growth, and a former captain in the U.S. Army. Now, he has done 15 full and 30 half Ironman competitions, one on each continent, and get this, he didn't even start until the age of 57. Amazing. He is also a prolific businessman, starting his professional journey at CPA firm Arthur Andersen and rising to the CEO level of several corporations, building 6 companies into national firms along the way, 2 of which he subsequently sold to Wall Street firms Salomon Brothers and First Boston. Jack, thank you so much for joining us today. Just want to jump right in, really excited about the conversation. A lot has happened in the last couple of years because of what the country has gone through with the coronavirus and its impact on businesses. So let's start with the obvious. How has COVID impacted selling in our country, and where are we now?
Yeah, so the great question, and we could have an arm wrestle in terms of where are we now? Different parts of the country, different parts of the world, or in different places. But here's what I would tell you the first and foremost, and that is whether you think we are neck deep into COVID and the pandemic, or if we are ankle deep and on our way out. The most important ingredient when it comes to selling is the 6 inches between your ears. 50% or more of success at selling has nothing to do with COVID. It has nothing to do with the pandemic. It has nothing to do with the product, price, service, strategies, or tactics. Half of selling is believing that you can be successful and then taking the initiative to do what you can do irrespective of what the environment is. So best piece of advice I have been able to give salespeople in the last 18 plus months is focus on that which you have control over. And don't worry about the things that you don't have control over. And in having control, I would tell you to leverage the aspect of being virtual. I can tell you that there have been salespeople that have folded their hands in dismay about, gosh, my forte is networking and we can't get together in large groups. Well, I can tell you that there's a tremendous amount of networking going on. It's just virtual. And so it's all up here in our head as to how we approach this environment.
What have been some of the bigger changes that you have seen with us having to deal with the pandemic?
Well, the first one and the most obvious is people being locked down and not being able to interact face to face with their community, going to conferences and conventions, visiting with trade shows, getting out face to face with the prospect or the customer. But some of us, to quote Woody Allen, if you see an angry mob coming towards you, get in front and call it a parade. Some of us just looked at the world and said, okay, the world has changed. And so how can I tip it in my favor? So as an example, I have a client in Ohio. They have 38 salespeople and they've had the best year ever. Now, it's not because they're in a product line that fits a pandemic. It has to do with the fact that their 38 salespeople were typically behind the wheel of their car, covering the state in their market territory. They couldn't do that anymore as they went into lockdown. The CEO of the company then said, well, you know what? We're going to sharpen our skills from a selling standpoint. And they practiced over Zoom in groups of 3. They did that an hour every day. And because of that, the CEO said, my salespeople right now are the best they've ever been at their selling aspects because they are so well prepared and so well practiced. I can tell you that during the pandemic, as a professional speaker, 2019, pre-pandemic, you're looking at a guy that was 200,000 air miles a year plus. I was in over 30 countries. And all of a sudden, I don't travel and not in front of large groups. And so people were coming and saying to me, how has it impacted your business? And I'm like, dramatically. However, within 60 days of being locked down, I brought in a professional team who built me a professional video studio. I'm not broadcasting from there. Today, I'm broadcasting from my home office. But in my home, there is a virtual studio that's been built with lighting and cameras, etc. And I will share with you that in June, I ended up setting a Guinness World Record for the largest virtual conference delivered in business of 21,261 people. Now,
Wow.
this is evidence of a guy that is shifting the way they deliver business. I used to do public events where people could buy a seat and I would choose cities to go to and announce I'm in this city. Well, with the lockdown, what I said is I'll do them virtually. And today I end up having people in my sessions that used to commute by car and a few by plane. Today I have them from 5 to 10 different countries and all throughout the 50 states attending because it's so much easier to access. Quite frankly, I won't be going back to open to the public live events going forward because the people that are attending my virtual are saying, this is easier for me and I can impact my marketplace quicker without going to a conference.
Well, I want to kind of double down on what you just said. It does allow more efficiency with time because you eliminate travel. You eliminate a lot of what goes on to going to conferences or even having simple meetings during the day. I think one of the positives of having to be virtual is you can do a lot more in a day. Would you agree with that?
There is no question about it. The key is to stay self-disciplined, to not take your eye off the ball, to, if you're working out of some type of place like your home, to make sure that you've got some space of privacy, if you will, a place that's conducive to being effective and not being distracted with a lot of things that the at home might present itself with.
You've talked about it wherever you go that people say how hard it is to find great salespeople. Why is it so hard?
Well, if we take the pandemic, we all recognize there is an additional challenge going on with finding people. There is an employment search that's historic in terms of finding people. But pre-pandemic and pandemic, we've always heard the same question. Really hard to find good salespeople. And I will turn to someone and say, well, are you looking for good salespeople? And they go, well, of course I am. And I turn to them at that moment and say, perfect, show me the list. And they look at me dumbfounded. If you don't have a list of people that you're looking for, well, you're not really looking for them. What you're really doing is being reactive and saying, I hope a good salesperson shows up at my doorstep, which I haven't found that process to work very well. So one of the key aspects of finding good salespeople is build a list of great salespeople that you would like to work in your company. And by the way, don't just make that list industry specific to your industry, because we have found that a great salesperson can learn the industry better than a poor salesperson that knows the industry has difficulty moving up in the ranks. The next thing that I would tell you is important from a recruiting standpoint is to know what you're shopping for, to know what you're looking for. And what I'm talking about there is a profile. And I'm not talking about a job description. I'm talking about a position profile. What are the personal attributes and characteristics that make a great salesperson in your industry and in your company? And then once you have your list, you have to nurture the list. No different than a salesperson nurturing their prospects. And that would be a courting process. My courting process in recruiting is 2 touches per month on each person that's on my list. And a touch would be a personal visit, a phone call, an email, a voicemail, a snail mail, any way that I reach out and stay in touch. And if we do that with enough people on our list, you're going to find that you're not having a hard time finding salespeople. Last item that I would add onto the list: consider as a company having a bonus paid to all of your employees to help you find people that meet the profile, and make that bonus something significant.
Hmm. You talked a second ago about the attributes of a salesperson. What do you consider to be essential attributes every salesperson should have?
That's a great question. And here in one word is the answer, but I'll give it to you in more than one word. But here is the key word: grit. GRIT. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. You know, what you're going to have as a salesperson is you're going to have a lot of people not returning your calls, not responding to your emails, not responding to your LinkedIn requests. Those that respond, you're going to hear no more than you're going to hear yes. And so you have to have that grit, that tenacity. That's what we're really looking for. If I were to add some other attributes, I would tell you that I'm looking for someone that's a self-starter, not somebody that I need to light their fire every day. They come out of their bed lit up on fire. And as well, disciplined, self-disciplined. And so that focus of being disciplined with a positive attitude, those are the keys of a top salesperson.
One of the things that you run into, Jack, when you talk to people about sales is you have a lot of people who say, "Oh, I could never be a salesperson. I could never ever do sales." And I like to tell people that every person is a salesperson. Babies come out learning how to sell. Babies know how to close you on a deal better than almost anyone else. Why do you think there is such a stigma against sales and people make it out to be something it's not?
Well, you got really close to the mark there with the baby as a salesperson. I tell people that are parents, if you have a child, don't tell me that you're not a salesperson, because you're selling that kid all day long, right? And so we're all in sales. Here's the problem. The problem is that the picture that people have of a salesperson is that used car sales guy, that guy that's pushing you and pressing you to do things that are not necessarily in your best interest. That's not what my definition of a salesperson is. My definition of a salesperson is one that's a partner, someone that builds a relationship, someone that tries to add value to the person that they're working with. My wife, Bonnie, of 47 years before she passed away a few years ago from cancer, Bonnie used to say, "I could never be a salesperson." But we were at a trade show and I needed to leave the trade booth that I had. And I said, "Look, just man the booth while I go on this errand and take a restroom break." And she said, "Yeah, but I'm not a salesperson." And I said, "All I want you to do is just be somebody that can help anybody that stops by the booth. Could you do that?" And she said, "Well, that I could do." And I said, "Well, then you're a salesperson." Helping people, whether with their challenges, with their opportunities, with their needs. That's really what a salesperson does. And as you said, we're all salespeople.
There is the concept of greatness, and we hear it so much now in this era of digital media. People talk about athletes being great, actors being great, but greatness is also something that you want to see in sales. Is it an innate thing, or is it something that a CEO can cultivate? And if it can be cultivated, how do you do it?
So, this is one of those questions that I think, a good attorney can take the prosecution side or the defense side,
Okay.
and have their opinions and their shot at winning. From where I sit, greatness can be achieved by anyone who desires to be great. The first thing that we need to decide is, what is the definition of greatness as an individual would see it. I mentioned my wife, Bonnie, earlier. Her idea of greatness in life was very different than mine. Neither one of them right or wrong, but right for the individual. Once we've defined what greatness means for us, what we've really wrestled down then is in the vernacular of business, we've now recognized what our vision is. You can't get there unless you know what there is. And so the way I like to say it is this: figuring out what great means to you, what will meet that test in your life. Once you understand what that destination is, then breaking it down into component parts, and I'm going to call those component parts goals, with some established timelines on how you're going to achieve the goals. And then what will facilitate you getting those goals accomplished and ultimately getting to that vision of greatness is lifelong learning. And as long as we package that together, then I think we have greatness sitting right there at our front step.
What is your perspective on something called the it factor, right? Because I mean, people can emote an energy that draws people in, especially in sales. It's essential that you're approachable. But what's your concept of the it factor?
Yeah, awesome questions, really. So a tremendous amount of people are really taken back by what I'm about to tell you, and that is that I am a full bore introvert. Now, the majority of people see me in a medium like a video, or they see me in the medium of being on stage. I want to tell you, I'm working really, really hard for the it factor, to be there on that stage and be dynamic and be all that the audience wants from a speaker. But quite frankly, I live in a neighborhood today where I've lived in this home for 6 years. There are neighbors on either side of me, and I don't know who they are, and they don't know me. I belong to a country club with 350 members, and maybe 4 or 5 members know me. The majority of people in my audiences watching me on stage would think I'm the life of the party, and everyone at the country club knows me. But that's my stage persona, if you will. That's my it factor. And so as a salesperson, what I need to do is I need to assess what my public is like, how I'm going to find the base of trust to build. And then I'm going to transform for that moment into the it factor, that which will make them more comfortable.
You have no idea how much I relate to what you just said on so many levels, but we will keep it moving. It just so wonderfully said. You've also said that a great sales manager's job isn't to grow sales. What do you mean by that?
So there's a very big difference between a salesperson and a sales manager. A salesperson's job is to win new customers and grow the ones they have and differentiate themselves from their competitors. A sales manager's job is something highly different. The sales manager's job is to grow salespeople in quantity and quality, because if you grow salespeople in quantity and quality, they in turn will grow your sales. So let's take it as an example. I started selling at the age of 7, and at 7 years old, I owned the market and charged twice the price of every kid I competed with. But I can tell you, over my 40, 50 years of selling, I'm a darn good salesperson. But here's the biggest problem. There's only so many hours in the day. I can only make so many calls. I can only take so many calls. I can only write so many orders. But if I were to hire 5 people and teach them what I know about selling, those 5 people will outperform me eventually. Well, instead of 5, what if it was 10? Instead of 10, what if it was 20? How about this? I'll take you to my largest sales force. My largest sales force had 2,600 salespeople. Now, that amount of people are going to outsell me no matter how good I am as a salesperson. So if you want to grow your sales as a company, my advice in most businesses: grow your sales force in quantity and quality. And that, in fact, is the job of a great sales manager.
So I want to get to systems, but I kind of want to lean in a little bit on what you just said and ask you about the importance of being a self-starter in relation to what you just said. You mentioned that in one of the previous questions, being a self-starter, meaning you're self-motivated, you want to get it done, you don't have to be micromanaged. That in relation to a sales manager and a salesperson relationship, that you're painting the canvas, but they're going and getting it done, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you've hit it right on the nail on the head. Look, my job as a sales manager is to find good salespeople, bring them on board, and make them even better than when they arrived. And so what I want to do is I want to find out where their strengths are, and I want to opportunize on those strengths. I want to find out where their weaknesses are. And what I want to do is I want to shore up, not necessarily change them, but shore up the areas in which they're weak with some type of support mechanisms. We spend an inordinate amount of time trying to fix the things that we're not very good at. And I think that's a misuse of time. Find people that are really good at the areas that your salespeople that are terrific at some things, and supplement them with that. I can tell you that I was a horrible student in science. And so why would you want me to work on my weaknesses in the science area? I was a horrible student at learning foreign languages. Please don't do that. Bring me an interpreter. Don't try to give me homework on how to be a better person at speaking some type of language, because it's too high a hurdle for me to climb. Let me focus on that which I'm really superb at, and then support me with in other ways. That's a sales manager's job. Make that assessment on each one of the people on your team.
Okay, well, let's talk about salespeople having systems or a series of processes in place so that they can excel. What do you mean by that? Or what do you expect that to look like?
Yeah, so let's go back to 2,600 salespeople. They were operating out of over 100 locations in the United States. And each time I would visit one of those locations, I had a similar presentation. And part of that was this: there aren't 2,600 best ways to sell this stuff. Hey, gang, what do you think about finding the best way that we could sell this? Build the systems and processes to reflect those best ways, practice the systems and processes, and then I bet you we annihilate the competition. And so one of the things that I'm famous for out there is this saying: sports teams are run better than most businesses. Sports teams are run better than most businesses. There isn't a coach in any sport at any level that would consider putting their players on the field without a playbook and without sufficient practice of the playbook. But when I wrote my best-selling book, Hyper Sales Growth, we were inundated with calls and requests to help companies grow at a significant pace. And I said, well, let me understand how you sell today, and we'll buckle on the next iteration to your processes. 98 out of every 100 companies that contacted me did not have a sales playbook. And so what I'm saying is this: if your company doesn't have a sales playbook, if you don't have documented systems and processes reflecting best practices, what that means by default is that each salesperson is selling their own way. That's like getting in the huddle in a football game and the quarterback saying, everybody go long and look, see if you can get open. That coach isn't winning many ball games. Here's the sad news. The sad news is that the top performing salespeople are the same people in most companies year after year after year. We have a president's club, a chairman's club, and I'm invited to speak at those clubs, and I'll go back multiple times to the same client, and it seems like a reunion because the same people are there. Now, think about this. They have the same economy, the same competitor, the same product, the same price, the same service, but the same people are at the top of the pack. It's very simple to me. Find out what your best people are doing, build it into processes, and then practice the processes.
Now, we've got a group of current and aspiring CEOs in our audience, obviously watching this. And so these forums give people an opportunity to learn from the absolute top of the wave in various industries. And you being in sales, this question that I'm going to ask next is worth the price of the trip all by itself. How does a great salesperson prepare for a sale?
Let's do it this way. Do your homework. You know, one of the greatest things that has come to the sales world over the last 20 years is the internet. Uh, on my cell phone, I can do an incredible amount of homework on an individual or a company. I can discover their products, their services. I can discover where their vision is. I can discover what they're trying to accomplish. I can even identify where and who they're competing with. And sometimes I can even, if I do my homework well enough, I can actually find where their pain points are. Um, Now, if I'm doing my homework, I'm leveraging the internet in that regard. I'm doing my research in that regard. And then this is really, really key. And then find a way to help those prospects and customers with whatever challenge or opportunity they're currently wrestling with. They will do business with you. Now, here is the key that I want to really impress upon the listener, and that is this. The answer that you give them doesn't always need to be your company, your product, or your service. Um, I will tell you in my business, over 30% of the leads that come into our company, we then flip to some other resource because we feel as though that's a better fit for that prospect or customer. And whenever I do that, business bounces back to me. And the reason that it bounces back to me is because I've earned their trust. And
Hmm.
at the end of the day, selling is the transfer of trust. So if salespeople spent more time figuring out how to help their prospects and customers and less time trying to sell their stuff, they would sell more than they've ever sold before.
Well, don't you think, Jack, if with what you just said, if you're successful at building a relationship with your client, they're going to create more reasons to buy something from you. They will find more reasons to come to you because at the end of the day, you're providing solutions, no matter what product or service you're selling, right?
Without a doubt. The 90% of my business today is repeat and referral. That's a very sweet place for a salesperson to be. But the reason that it's 90% repeat and referral is one, people, I've earned their trust over time. They realize I'm not trying to sell them something. I direct them into the area I think that will best suit their needs. And they have learned to be reliable on me. In other words, I'm going to be one of the first people they call, regardless of what they're challenged with, because they said, well, the last time I talked to him, he didn't try to sell me something. He actually pointed me in a direction that had a solution that really worked for our company or for me as an individual. And so I'm going to give the guy a ring again and see what happens. That is the bedrock. Trust is the bedrock.
So, people make mistakes in various areas of business. What are three common mistakes people make as a salesperson?
The first one will be shocking, I think, to an awful lot of people. But the first mistake is we ask salespeople or salespeople themselves take their own initiative and they call on too many people. When we really sit down and look at the sales organizations of companies, the better performing salespeople actually call on less people and they
Mhm.
write more business. The key is they call on the right people. Too many salespeople calling on too many people that don't deserve to be called on. And if you spread yourself too thin, you then have challenge being remembered, having an idea of where the needs are, and building that bedrock of trust. So narrow your focus. Focus precedes success. The second mistake that I see being made is something I alluded to earlier. I'll be more blunt now. Too many salespeople out pitching. I was on a tour in India in 2019, And 3 different stops of the 11 stops before I got on stage, these salespeople came up to me and said, "Are you going to teach us some new pitches today? You're going to teach us some new pitches?" And I said, "No, I'm going to do something even better than that." And I paused and I had their eyes glaring at me and I said, "I'm going to teach you how to stop pitching. People do not want to be sold. No one wants somebody trying to sell you something." And so my advice, stop pitching. And then the third is that we don't spend the time building the bedrock of trust, and we don't spend the time cultivating relationships. So take it in reverse. Narrow your focus, stop pitching, and build relationships based on trust. That's the key.
Okay. What is a high payoff activity?
So, the acronym I use is HPA,
Right.
high payoff activity. What we've discovered is going into companies that more than 50% of a salesperson's time is being spent on things that don't win new customers or grow the ones they have. I'll give you an example. If I were still in selling out there actively in the field, and to some degree I still am, but if I were actively as a salesperson, as I think of a salesperson, I can tell you that I'm going to be really great at making cold calls, at getting through the gatekeeper, at building that trust in the relationship and so forth that we've talked about. But if I have a sales manager that tells me every day, "Jack, I want you to sit in front of a computer keyboard and update your contact management system," I'm going to be a fail. I'll be one finger Jack on the keyboard. I was running a $23 billion bank when I was in my 30s. Here I am in my 70s. And I'm still a great salesperson, but I'm horrible at working with computers because I've had people that have supported me in that regard. So I believe in an updated contact management system. Don't get me wrong there, but don't have me being the data entry person. So, as a speaker, for me, I'm going to be more effective if I'm coaching people. That's one of my roles. And if I'm speaking on stage or doing it virtually. But every one of my presentations has a workbook for the participants. There's somebody better on my team that's quicker and more efficient and more effective at building that workbook that's going to be reflective of my comments in my workshops and stage than me sitting at that keyboard banging out a workbook. That's just not Jack Daly. HPAs for every salesperson should be figured out. What's going to win new customers, grow the ones you got, and then anything else the company has to be doing, could we find someone else to do it inside the company, outside the company, or maybe even, how about this for a radical move, just stop doing it.
You've been around the country and have spoken to CEOs all over. What are some observations about where they're getting it right and where they're getting it wrong?
If I look at it from a CEO standpoint, we're not spending time on the HPAs. And let me just make sure we get this clear. I'm not just talking about the salespeople not getting it right on HPAs. I do one-on-one CEO coaching with CEOs all over the world. And what I find is I want to know, what does your typical work week look like? What are you working on? What does your typical month look like? And what are you spending your time on? And what I find is that the CEOs don't know where their high payoff activities are either. So they're not getting their HPAs right in most cases. I have CEOs coming to me that say they want my help in growing their business, and I ask them, "What's your vision for the business?" And I get a blank stare. I want it to be bigger. Well, how much bigger? Bigger. You can't be that general. As I said earlier, you can't get there unless you know what there is. But if you were a $150 million company and you told me that you wanted to be a $500 million company within the next 5 years, there's a vision. Now we can break that down into pieces and figure out what we need to do to get there. A third area that CEOs drop the ball on is that word focus. Particularly entrepreneurial CEOs, chasing shiny objects. What I try to teach my CEOs that I work with is pick your lane and then focus and own that lane. Another area that I wish we would spend more time on at the CEO level is the culture of the company. Creating an environment where the people who work in our company don't get up moaning about having to go into work, but actually jump out of bed and say, hot damn, I get to go to work at this great company. And so are we spending our energy at creating a winning culture? Well, those are few of the key areas of a CEO that I wish they were spending more time on.
Once this webcast is over, what's one of the most important changes that you think a viewer can implement to get to that place they want to be?
You know what? I'm going to give two. One of them is prioritize your prospects and your clients. Just list your prospects and your clients in the order in which they are of the highest priority, and then figure out how to spend more time on the ones that are at the top of the pile. Again, calling on less people and writing more business. I've worked with an awful lot of CEOs over the last 3-4 years that I've been coaching people, and I will tell you that has been a game changer for them, and it doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of time to list them out and prioritize them. And then the other thing that I would tell you, no matter where you are in an organization, no matter what your role is, from a salesperson to a sales manager to the CEO of the company, be sure that you're spending your time on the HPAs. Every single human being is blessed with the same amount of time. We get 168 hours each week. What we have to do is we need to make the best use of our 168. And I will tell you that if anyone were to shadow me, at the end of the day, they'll shake their head and go, man, that was a whirlwind. We got so much done today. But it's because I thought about it. I channeled my energy towards it. I prioritized it, I focused, and then success took place.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jack. This has been great for me. Hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation as well.
You know what? The questions are the key. And I will tell you that's another takeaway for the salespeople. The person who asks the questions is in control. So as a salesperson, if you want to be in more control, go and do your homework, think through the questions before you get to the prospect customer's place of business.
I'd also like to thank all of our guests for joining me this morning and thank our sponsors for making this episode possible. Please join us next month when our guest will be Paylocity's CEO, Mr. Steve Beauchamp. See you then.